Komið sæl og velkomin í þáttin á ferð á flugi. Við stöllur fórum á kaupstefnu sem haldið var dagana 8. og 11. maí í Hörpunni. Þar fengum við að taka viðtal við framkvæmdastjóra Klía sem eru ein stærstu samtök skemmtiferðaskipa í heiminum. Hann heitir Robert Astoff. Áður en við sýnum það viðtal, ætlum við að sýna ykkur stutt myndband sem myndband sem notað við kynningu fyrir skemmtiferðaskipin sem hingað sigla.
Og þegar þú komst inn í líf mitt breytist ég, þú komst við hjartað.
Hi, I'm Ralph Grizzle, and we just arrived in sunny Reykjavik. We have less than a day to explore this lovely destination and its surroundings. First stop, the Visitor Center. Well, this is the Tourist Information Center, and this is brand new. It's a staging center for all of the cruise line activities. And by the way, Reykjavik has one of the highest percentages of participants for shore excursions. On the day that we arrived in Reykjavik, we chose to take the Grand Circle Tour. This is the most popular shore excursion because you can see a lot in a short amount of time. So here we have the famous Icelandic ponies. These were brought to Iceland more than 1,000 years ago by the Vikings. And they have a very specific, a well-developed gait, which allows for a very smooth ride. And in fact, riding Icelandic ponies is one of the popular activities here in Iceland.
Þú komst inn í líf mitt breytist ég, þú komst við hjartað í mig. Ég þori að mæta hverju sem þú komst við hjartað í mig.
Of all the shore excursions offered in Iceland, this one is the most popular. The opportunity to experience and photograph the geyser. The geyser is the one that gave its name to all the other geysers in the world. Cruise ships have been sending passengers here since 1905. Well, you can see why 80% of all cruise passengers who come to Iceland take a shore excursion. It's to see beautiful nature like this. Behind me is the Langjökull Glacier. We're on the Golden Circle shore excursion, and we're headed now to the waterfall known as Gullfoss. This is the second stop on the Golden Circle tour. It's called Gullfoss, and it basically means golden waterfall. This waterfall wouldn't be here if it weren't for a lady more than 100 years ago who saved it from being converted to a hydroelectric dam.
Og þegar þú komst inn í líf mitt breytist ég, þú komst við hjartað í mig. Ég þori að mæta.
Well, this is the final stop on the Grand Circle tour, and it is a really special place. First of all, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And secondly, it is where Europe and Asia meet North America. The tectonic plates, it's the only place in the world where you can see this. They're drifting apart at about 1 inch a year, and here you can see the rift that are caused by these two plates. So after the Grand Circle tour, you still have time to come out and enjoy the Blue Lagoon. It's only 30 minutes from the city center of Reykjavik. You can also combine a half-day Blue Lagoon tour with a half-day city tour. But the best thing to do is come to the Blue Lagoon and just sit and relax in this geothermal seawater.
Og þegar þú komst inn í líf mitt breytist ég, þú komst við hjartað í mig. Ég þori að mæta.
Well, now I'm strolling the city center of Smoky Bay. That's the name of Reykjavik. It doesn't mean that it's polluted or anything like that. The Smoky Bay comes from the fact that the smoke comes from all the geothermal activity. This is the world's northernmost capital, but you don't have to worry about freezing to death here because it's a very mild climate. We're now saying goodbye to Reykjavik. What you saw in this video is what you can experience in one day in the world's northernmost capital. I'm Ralph Grizzle, and I encourage you to visit Reykjavik.
Þú ert að horfa á INN, Íslands nýjasta nýtt.
Ráðstefnur, fundir og ásatíðir. Glæsileg aðstæða. Hótel Borgarnes, Egilsgötu 16, hotelborgarnes.is.
Alsælar með daginn. Dekurtilboð í baðhúsinu. Kynnið ykkur hópatilboð á baðhúsið.is. Baðhúsið Brautarholti.
Skráðu þig á ferðakaupstefnuna Iceland Travel Workshop á Radisson Blu Hotel Saga í Reykjavík 16. til 19. maí. Skráning á icelandtravelworkshop.com.
Við bjóðum upp á íslenskt lostæti, framreitt á suður-ameríska og suður-evróska vísu. Veitingastæðurinn Mar við gömlu höfnina í Reykjavík.
Taktu sumari frá. Gisting, morgunverður á hlaðborði og kvöldverður. Aðeins 9.900 krónur á mann í 2 manna herbergi. Hótel Selfoss.
Veldu góða þjónustu á þínum áfangastað. Bílalega Akureyrar á 16 stöðum land allt.
Á Íslandi eru 10.864 virk fyrirtæki. Nærð þú athygli þeirra? Markhópalistar Creditinfo. Radisson Blu Hotel býður upp á frábæra fundaraðstöðu og góðar veitingar fyrir fundi og ráðstefnur.
Rotþróapakkarnir okkar innihalda það sem til þarf, ásamt leiðbeiningum. Heildarlausnir, réttarlausnir. Borgarplast, Mosfellsbæ, sími 561 22 11.
Komdu í pítsu eða taktana með heim. Eldofnin Grímsbær við Bústaðaveg, sími 533 1313.
Hjá þeim hefjast allir dagar eldsnemma, allan ársins hring. Hvernig sem viðrar tryggja þér okkur gott hráefni. Íslenskir mjólkurbændur eru hetjurnar á bakvið gæði óðalsostanna. Ertu nú þroskaður fyrir bragðið?
Ég fengi hérna til mín í þennan þátt Róbert Astoff frá Klía, framkvæmdastjóri Klía, og I'm gonna welcome you to this interview on our travel channel at INN in Iceland, and welcome you to Iceland again. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your association Klía.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me, and thank you for your interest in the cruise industry. Klía stands for the Cruise Lines International Association, and we are the industry's representative body for the cruise lines. We have 60 cruise line members around the world, and Klía represents 99% of the industry. So we are truly the authentic voice of the cruise industry, and our objective is to speak with one voice and to give consistent messages. And our audience is not only governments at the international, the regional and the national level, but it's also the consumers and the guests who travel on our ships for cruises, and it's also the travel agents who play a very important part in selling those cruises to our guests. So we want to speak to the full range of stakeholders involved in this fantastic industry of ours, and to provide them with the tools that they need so that we can continue to grow the industry and continue to add great economic value to the economies of Europe and to the port communities that our ships visit.
This is your first time to Iceland, and Iceland as a destination for the cruise companies. Can you tell us a little bit how you see Iceland as a destination from your association point of view for the future, just briefly?
Iceland is a very exciting destination. It has a fantastic array of opportunities in terms of geology, in terms of wildlife, in terms of culture. It's a very vibrant community, very vibrant nightlife, and I think that is shown by the fact that when the cruise lines come to Iceland, 90 to 95% of the shore excursions, the trips that the passengers take from the cruise lines, are booked. So 95% booking is a very high level and really demonstrates the attractiveness of Iceland as a destination. Of course, as a destination, Iceland also poses some challenges for the lines. It is quite a distance from other ports, which means that you have to have a very careful itinerary planning program to make sure that it's efficient, and it also has a limited season. We very much see the season in Iceland as being from May to August, which is quite a short time. But aside from those challenges, and of course there are challenges in all kinds of ports all over the world, Iceland, I believe, is a destination which offers a lot of attractive options for the cruise lines, and that can grow if the right conditions are put in place.
You say right conditions. What are the right conditions? do we need to do?
Well, it's very important to recognise that a destination has to be attractive for the guests, but it also has to be profitable for the cruise lines. And quite often, the profits that you can make from shore excursions can be overtaken by very high port costs in some parts of the world. So it's very important that Iceland recognises that to grow the industry, you need to grow the number of cruise calls and the number of passenger visits, and that a lower yield on a higher number of passengers will, in the longer term, yield greater results than charging higher prices for fewer passengers. So I think it's very important that Iceland looks to grow the size of the cake and doesn't seek to impose high port costs or other burdensome regulations on the industry while it's at this very early stage in its growth.
I heard on a convention here this morning, I think it was Carnival, or some of the speakers was talking about the growth in the industry, and one of the destinations that had a decrease in ships was Alaska, and that was mainly an example of where they increased the taxes.
Indeed, that's the case. In 2007, I believe, Alaska introduced a head tax of $50 per passenger. What we saw then immediately was that Alaska became unprofitable for the cruise lines, and what had been a very strong growth area and a very strong market then declined significantly, while all other areas of the world grew in terms of cruising capacity. So what we saw in Alaska was a direct correlation between overtaxation and a decline in market share, and that's a lesson which I think that many other port communities, many other governments can learn from. To understand that the ships are mobile assets, that these are companies who need to maximise the use of those assets, and of course they want to take those ships to the areas of the world where they can obtain the best yields.
One of the places that has a good growth was Norway. Are they the reason for the growth? Is that due to they are more competitive on the taxes, or is it the destination itself? You know, what do you think the reason is there?
With all destinations, there's a balance between costs and benefits. Norway is a fantastic destination. They have some excellent ports. They have some excellent shore excursions. It's very attractive as a cruise for customers. But equally, Norway can be quite a high-cost centre for cruises to visit. But I think what sets Norway apart is that they've been very good at marketing themselves as a destination for the cruise lines. And I think it demonstrates that if you can make passengers excited about your country, excited about your destination, if they really want to come here, then in certain areas of the world, those passengers are prepared to pay a premium for the privilege of visiting some of these fantastic and exotic destinations.
When you talk about marketing the destination, like Norway, do they market through CLIA, or just thinking because we are pretty new in this part of the industry? Can you share a little bit secret success of Norway to us Icelandics?
Sure. Well, I think that Norway has a very cohesive view of how it views its tourism industry. So you have Innovation Norway, which is a conglomeration of a number of government bodies which seek to drive tourism in a very structured manner. But you also have an organisation called Cruise Norway, which represents the Norwegian ports, and they come together and they work very hard to make sure that they present a package of measures to the cruise lines. You know, it's a real bundle of options, rather than working singly, so that the Port of Oslo is then in competition with the Port of Bergen, with the Port of Trondheim. Instead of doing that, they come together and they present Norway as a whole, and then they allow the cruise lines to make their choice within that attractive destination.
Yeah, very good. For now, there are a lot of companies here in Iceland that are trying to reach the cruise lines. How, you know, the shops, the bus companies, the car rentals, the hotels. What would you suggest for them to do? How should we approach the cruise lines? Should we do it through you, CLIA, the association, or in another way? Any suggestion?
Well, I think that the trick is to do it in both ways. The industry lays on a number of events, such as Cruise Ship in Miami or Sea Trade Europe, which is taking place in Hamburg in September this year. And these are ideal opportunities for companies to go and meet the cruise lines directly and to make arrangements, and it's very important that they use these opportunities wisely, that you don't just turn up and expect people to walk past your stand, that you pre-book meetings with the cruise lines executives, so that you really maximise value for those events. But also, Cruise Lines International Association is putting in place a very exciting associate membership benefits package. And what we want to do is to really structure our associate membership scheme so that we put the right people on the shore side in contact with the right people in the cruise lines.
Yeah.
So if you are a port or a destination, then we want to put you in touch with our itinerary planners. You know, if you're on the technical side, perhaps selling equipment for the ships, then we want to put you in touch with the procurement people in the cruise lines. And we believe that by building a really powerful associate membership scheme, we start to enlarge the size of the cruise industry as a whole. We move away from just being cruise lines to being the cruise industry, and that adds value to the cruise lines, it adds value to the destinations, and it adds value to all of our stakeholders, and that in turn allows us to be much more effective when we talk to governments and to regulators to say that this is a big industry which employs a lot of people, and that's why you need to make sure that you put in place the appropriate regulatory regime so that Iceland and other parts of the world remain a good place in which to do cruise business.
One of the things that was mentioned here earlier was, I think again it was Carnival, because of their good success with Iceland as a destination. You hear I'm just focusing on Iceland. You know, it's the one place in the world that everybody should go to. I think they stopped their ship sailing here in the end of August, and if they should extend the season, how should we approach Carnival? You know, to get them sailing here longer. You know, for us, of course, extending the season is very important.
Indeed, and seasonality of the cruise product is a challenge which many Northern European ports face, in the Baltic as well, so you're not alone in Iceland in having this challenge. Of course, to some extent, the seasonality, particularly the further north you go, is determined by the climate and by weather conditions and sea conditions, particularly if there is ice around. But I think all the while that it remains logistically safe and to come to Iceland, to try and extend the season, we have what we call the shoulders of the season. And these are the starts of the early part of the season and then the late part of the season. And I think what you need to do to extend the season is to look at your port costs and the costs of doing business in Iceland and say that, well, perhaps, you know, we should be charging slightly less at the end of August than we would be charging in June or July. And then that makes it much more attractive for the companies to continue to investigate whether or not to prolong their season in Iceland.
So it's a matter of price.
Like with airlines, price is of course an element, but it feeds into a wider mix of where the ships are, where the ships are going, what part Iceland plays, whether it's part of a closed loop itinerary or whether Iceland is a transit call on a transatlantic crossing. So there are a number of factors, but price is of course a key element in that mix.
I came into it earlier, you know, that when we were discussing here, the discussion about the cruise line is that they don't leave enough money in the countries. You know, they come and everything is shopped on board the ships. Some areas you've done much better in creating more business. One last word, any big secret, you know, to reach more and get the business people to go and stay longer, and the ships to stay longer here also.
I mean, we commission research each year on volumes and passenger spend, and our research tells us consistently that on average in every European port of call, passengers spend an average of €99 each in the destinations that they visit. Okay. The crew, and don't forget there may be 1,000 or 2,000 crew on some of these ships, also spend on average €16 each. So these are considerable amounts of money directed into the local communities. not only is that a significant source of revenue for the destinations that cruise ships visit, but what we also find is that cruising is an ideal way by which to market Iceland for a longer term stay. So people may come to Iceland, they may visit Reykjavik for 12 or 24 hours on board a cruise ship, they see what a fantastic country it is, they see how beautiful the city is, what a vast array of opportunities Iceland offers, and then they may come back for a week or a 2-week holiday. And so in many ways, the cruise industry is providing Iceland and Reykjavik with some of the best advertising opportunities that it could ever hope to have. So they are two key ways in which the cruise industry directs real added value into the destinations that it visits.
How, here today, it's not long time ago we just had one airline, that's common with small countries like us. How important is it for the cruise lines to have, in your speech earlier here this morning, you mentioned, CLIA wants to cooperate closely with airlines and all the other companies. How important is it for a destination like Iceland to have more, the frequency of companies flying to establish more increase with the cruise lines?
Well, I think when you talk about the airlines, really it depends whether you're looking at cruise lines and trying to attract them to Iceland as a turnaround port, by which I mean this is the destination from which the cruise ship will start and finish its voyage, or whether Iceland is seen as a transit port, by which it's a port on a longer cruise between two other destinations. If Iceland is to be successful as a turnaround port, then airlift and bed stock in terms of hotel numbers becomes crucially important. It's very important that you have an airport which can take a significant volume of passengers, and that airport has very good links into the port itself, so that you can get the passengers from the airport to the port very simply.
In those destinations that you have this type of business, if I recall it correctly, those type of passengers that sail one way and fly one way, they stay 3 days average? Do you have any average figures of?
That's right. I mean, I don't have an average figure to hand, but certainly when you have a turnaround port, the many passengers will take advantage of that fact, fly in 2 or 3 days earlier, so they can spend 2 or 3 days in Reykjavik and then depart on their cruise. And that is certainly a feature. And as you say, at the end of the cruise as well, many passengers again will extend their stay in that final port of call by 2 or 3 days, so they can also extend their holiday further.
Do you see an increase in that in the world? The one way do you have any worldwide statistic? Is there an increase, or is there? What I mean is there an increase in this type of passengers? Do you have any statistics?
In terms of fly cruising, do you mean? I don't have those figures to hand, but fly cruising remains an important part of the market. Fly cruising remains under pressure because, of course, there are high airfares at the moment. But I think also more companies are embarking passengers at more ports along the route. So traditionally it was very much one port of call was your turnaround port. Increasingly we're starting to see companies embarking passengers at routes along the itinerary. So for instance, some of the transatlantic tours which come out of the northwest coast of the United States or Canada may have the final destination as London, but some of those passengers may disembark in Reykjavik.
Any last-minute advice before I know you're leaving? It's a very short stop that you have in Iceland. Too short stop.
It is too short, yes. But I will come back, you see. My advice to Iceland is to make the most of your assets. Make sure that you have proper linkages between the destination and the port. Don't look at them as separate entities, look at them as one entity. Make sure that the logistics are good, that the links between the airport and the port are good, that it's easy for the companies to take passengers on shore excursions, that we make life as simple as possible, and that you provide good facilities for the ships in terms of being able to provide disposal for waste and recycling, in terms of being able to provide potable water, and all the things that the ships need within the port need to be readily accessible, and that they need to be accessible at a price which is fair and which is competitive.
Thank you very much. Have a nice flight back, and we hope to see you soon in Iceland again. Thank you.
My pleasure, and you certainly will. Thank you.
Takk fyrir í dag. Sjáumst þess að viku liðinni. Bless.